Hey, what's up guys? I'm CodeHatcher123 from IcePops, and as the title states, I'll be giving you some tips for early prototyping in game development. Before we start, these tips are for prototyping, which is only necessary for larger projects over longer periods of time, usually projects that you would like to release either for free or sell commercially. Before you embark on such a project, make sure that you know the engine well enough and have some experience making games. A great way to get this necessary experience and knowledge is through game jams. We highly suggest participating in game jams right after you finish your first Unity beginner tutorial. Game jams test your knowledge and, unlike many people believe, expand your skill set in a minimal amount of time. Most game jams have extremely short time frames, so they don't take much commitment. These game jams are a great way to practice and are all around fun. Number one right here is to scope small. When you go into a new project, oftentimes we make them huge ideas. We'd recommend that you start with a small scope, something easy, then expand as you continue development. This will allow you to finish projects and not leave them to be forgotten. Remember that prototyping is supposed to be quick and sometimes messy, so don't expand too much. You should also cut down on things. Let's say you're planning on having a climbing mechanic, a plane sim mechanic, puzzles, and shooting. Figure out which of these are the most fun. So for example, let's use flying and shooting. You would scrap climbing and puzzles so you can finish the project without being overwhelmed. This allows for simpler, yet more enjoyable games to play as well as create. This way of cutting things during prototyping is called iterative design, or some people say finding the fun. You just try different ideas until you find what that fun is and you go with it. There's a GMTK video called where he discusses finding the fun. The link will be in the description for that. The scope of the project is decided during prototyping. This is when you test out the story ideas and game mechanics. It is a good idea to cut down on both of these, as I mentioned earlier. Coming in at number 2 is to plan and set goals. Planning is very important when starting a project, so you know what to do. We personally like using ZenKit or Trello, which are both great tools for making lists and checklists for what you want to accomplish. It is very tempting to set huge goals, like making an MMORPG or making the next Fortnite and Valorant. But these games take years of development with huge teams and a couple hundred people. If you're like us and have a tiny team with a small budget, make sure your game reflects that and don't overreach. If you are thinking about how your game can compete with those huge titles, think specific, think niche. Indie game developers have the advantage of flexibility and not having to satisfy investors or guarantee a good profit. When doing this planning, only plan the prototyping phase. You shouldn't be planning out every little detail because more often than not, you end up diverging from the planned path. At this point in your project, it's way too soon to set up long-term goals, although you can have very broad or vague goals. Creating short-term goals will allow you to take your vision and turn them into a reality. Short-term goals with clear steps on how to achieve a sense of accomplishment for you and your others working on the project. It is a clear visualization of how far you have come and will help motivate you. For example, we set up a ZenKit for all of our art things. We split it up into 3 different categories: to buy or find the assets, to do the assets ourselves or make them, and undecided. It relieves the pressure of thinking about the art assets, which allows us to continue working without being bogged down. Make sure you are setting constraints so you aren't constantly adding things. In fact, if anything, you should be cutting out parts. I mentioned this before, but repeating is good. If you do cut something out, however, make sure that it does not come back in. Simplifying your game is a lot better than making it more complicated. For example, if you don't have the resources for animal assets, cut them out. If you don't, you will become stressed thinking about unrealistic things instead of focusing on the necessary elements of the game. You should also have goals whenever you sit down to work. Set a reasonable goal that you can get done in whatever time frame you have. Like, I want to finish the inventory system by the end of the week. Today, I will be working on the scriptable object class for the items. Another way you can become more focused is by setting up an incentive for yourself, such as once I finish the inventory system, I'll play some Valorant. This will allow you to beat the grind. For number 3, we have use the asset store. When prototyping, art isn't a huge deal. However, it's something you should keep in mind while you work. The asset store is a great place to grab assets because they are all licensed properly. When buying or using free assets from other unofficial marketplaces, be careful of the license that they come with. There are many free assets, and there are also some very good paid assets. If you are using placeholder art, we recommend changing it as fast as possible because you'll start to make your game around it. This is fine for placeholders that have commercial licenses because you are not forced to change them at all. But with placeholders that do not have commercial permissions, be very careful using them. There are links down below if you want to check out Unity's license terms and the Creative Commons terms. For number 4, we have Greyboxing. Greyboxing is a great tool for mapping out levels and getting a feel for what you want the player to experience. As the name suggests, you will be using gray or white boxes to make structures or your level. Basically, no materials, no textures, and very basic geometry. There are many benefits to doing this. First, it allows you to test what kind of vibe the level is giving. It also allows you to see whether or not it's capturing the feeling that you want your players to feel. Second, it allows you to test mechanics like power-ups, weapons, double jumping, and other crazy mechanics. Third, it lets you know whether or not your level is playable and if everything is scaled properly. Last but not least, it gives you a blueprint of how big your models or art have to be, which means your art team can start working on the art. There is a link in the description explaining Greyboxing further. These next 2 tips are smaller tips, but they are very important when either working with multiple people or needing 3D models for your players or enemies. So number 5, we have using GitHub. If you're working with multiple people, Unity Collab is a good tool to use. However, if you don't want to pay for the amount of gigs or seats, GitHub is also an amazing tool. It's free and has a limit of 100 gigs. It's what Skiwi and I use to collaborate on larger projects. And then number 6 is to use Mixamo. If you need character models for your 3D game, Mixamo is a great tool that you can use to get placeholder models. It's a free Adobe service that provides models, animations, and rigs. And the best part is you can use these models in your finished, published product. Is it just me? Or is that Xbox looking kinda thick? Those are all the tips that we have for you today. If you learn anything, consider leaving a like and sharing this video with those who would find it useful. If you like this type of content, consider subscribing and turning on the notification bell so you won't miss a video. If you have any questions or more tips, comment them down below or tell us on our Discord server, which you can also join down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!